Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 24 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I want to tell you something about Steve Palmer. Now, I've never met Steve Palmer, but I have notes in front of me because we're going to speak to Steve about his book called Say Grace, How the Restaurant Business Saved My Life. What I want to do, I never do this, but I want to do this because there's such a contrast in reading his information on Amazon and then his credentials. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
On Amazon, this is what it says. As a child, Steve Palmer never belonged. Not in school, not in his troubled home, not with friends. After his father and grandfather passed away, he was sent to a series of rehabs and halfway houses before ending up on the streets. Drugs and alcohol soon became a way of life. Okay? Now, that's not the whole thing, but that's the beginning to the listing on Amazon. Now, listen to the accomplishments that person, Steve Palmer, was able to make in his life. Mm-hmm. He's, first of all, a successful author. His book, again, is called Say Grace. We're going to talk about that in a second. He's a restaurateur. In other words, he's been successful in business. He's the co-founder of Ben's Friends, which is a nonprofit support group for food and beverage industry professionals struggling with substance abuse and addiction. And he's the founder and managing partner of the Indigo Road Hospitality Group. So right there, you see that somebody who they had all the odds stacked against them, or against him in this case, was able to turn that around. Steve Palmer, I'm already impressed without even, I didn't say hi to you real quickly. Good morning, Steve. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you today? Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm already impressed with you. Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia today. I live in Charleston, but I happen to be we have restaurants in Atlanta as well, so I came in last night.
And would I know the name of the restaurant? What is your restaurant called?
So we have 6 in Atlanta. We have in the Hotel Claremont, we have a French restaurant called Tiny Lou's. We have Oak Steakhouse. We have Tsukoshi, Donetto, Coletta, Oak, and Oku, all across Midtown Atlanta and North Atlanta.
Oh my gosh, I got to get up to Atlanta.
I know.
All right, so does the book tell the story that helps us understand where you came from and where you ended up?
It does. You know, I wrote the book. The purpose and the goal of the book is to move the Ben's Friends mission along. You know, my story is certainly not an uncommon one. Broken childhood, turned to addiction at 11 years old, turned to drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism. Went from a, fairly stable suburb kid to living on the streets within 4 or 5 years. And thankfully, and I write in the book, the restaurant business really saved my life twice. First and foremost, it accepted me. And the wonderful thing about the restaurant business is that it's an even playing field. It's diverse, it's inclusive, and really, as long as you're willing to work hard and be a part of a team, then there's a place for you. And it was the first time in my life, I think, when I found it, that I felt like I was home. I felt like I belonged somewhere. Now, the converse of that, unfortunately, is that for many, many decades, the elephant in the room in our industry has been drug and alcohol use. And it's been sort of a work hard, play hard. We celebrate the bad boy chefs and the bad behavior. And thankfully, in the last 5 years, our industry is sort of having a reckoning. And I think it's been the opioid crisis. I think it's been, folks like Anthony Bourdain and his suicide, which really affected a lot of chefs and certainly in the chef community that I work in. Right. And closer to home, we had a chef named Ben Murray commit suicide while he was at work. And what we didn't know but would come to find out is that he had been in and out of detox and in and out of rehabs, and we had no idea that he was struggling. And so, we started Ben's Friends. Really, we started it in Charleston, thinking it would be a local support group. But there really has become this interest about mental health in our industry, and I'm happy to say we'll be in 16 cities.
Wow.
By February. So there's this. It's now kind of become this movement. I'm a sober person. I was the result of an intervention from a restaurant owner who basically said, "Clean out your office or go to rehab," and he saved my life. So truly, I wouldn't be on this call with you today. I would be dead. Had I not found the restaurant business and had the people of the restaurant business save my life. And so Say Grace is a story about that, but it's also a story about how wonderful and generous and caring people in the restaurant industry are.
Wow, that's awesome. And the success of the book, if I could brag about it, it's #1 right now. I can't remember what category it was, but it shows on Amazon that it's #1. Do you? Here's the very predictable question from the radio host. I'm sure that other radio hosts are asking the same question, but do you think you would be doing what you're doing right now had you not been at rock bottom when you were younger? No. I think listen, I don't believe in accidents. I think that everything has happened the way that it was supposed to. As much as none of us would ever wish homelessness on a teenage boy, and no one would ever wish the really traumatic things that I had to go through. They are the things that the worst parts of my life are now being used to be of service to other people. And so, in retrospect, I can say, hey, everything happened for a reason, and I needed to go through that to be in this place. Having said that, that certainly doesn't mean I would wish that on anybody, because it's tough, and a lot of my friends are dead. Wow. So let me ask you, here's another, this is kind of weird. If we were to make a It's a Beautiful Life kind of a movie based on your life, and the angels took you back in time so you could speak to your younger self, I'm imagining this scene would be in the movie. Just before you're about to tell yourself not to do something, you turn to the angel and say, "No, let me do it, because that's how I became who I am today."
Yeah, I would probably say that, and I would probably say, "Hang on, it's going to be okay."
Oh, I love that.
And can you tell, now that you have gone through it and you founded all of the restaurants, that when you're looking at bartenders and the wait staff, can you tell if somebody is beginning to have a problem?
I can, and I say this all the time. I'm not anti-alcohol. My wife has an occasional glass of champagne. Alcohol's not bad. It was just bad for me, right? I mean, we know that addiction is a disease. You're born with it. It is what it is. I have often said that I can be in a room of 100 people drinking, and I can tell you the ones that have crossed over that line where it's no longer something they're doing for fun, that it's something that they're doing because they have to do it. And even when I don't want to see it, you can see it. When you've gone through the process of recovery, it's a look in somebody's eyes. You can tell there's almost like a sadness or a heaviness, or you can just tell that they're not drinking just to have fun and be social anymore. They're drinking because they have to.
The book, I'm sure, will be interesting to anybody who reads it. I'm wondering if you've had any feedback from people who can relate to it. So I mean, it's a heavy topic, right? And I hope that people, I hope that people find it a hopeful story. I have gotten emails. I've gotten an email from a girl that was sexually molested by her father, and she's been drunk ever since. And she read the book, and she's now going to get help. I got an email. I got a message on Twitter at 6 a.m. from a chef in Chicago. Said he's now realized he needs help. I'm getting these emails all the time, and it's listen. There were people that were there for me there were people that loved me when I couldn't love myself, and
to the degree that the book can help that, I certainly don't think the book is, the book, if nothing else, I hope it shows people that you can be fairly bad off in life. And if you're willing to do the work and you're willing to believe in yourself and you're willing to get with, people that maybe believe in you when you can't, that there is hope and there is a chance for recovery.
The amazing comparison between yourself and Anthony Bourdain, if I could just...
Starting route to Francis Marion Military.
All right, I'm sorry. We're going someplace. We got a GPS talking to us.
I hit the wrong button.
All right, so Anthony Bourdain was also, as you are, a talented writer. And I don't know that he knew that would take him from where he was in those kitchens to where he went. Is that same thing going to happen to you? Is the book going to actually change your life?
I don't think I'm going to quit my day job. We have 24 restaurants in the group, so I am for sure gonna go back to work. I don't see myself as an author, which is interesting. I don't. I felt like I had a story to tell. I'm sure there are a lot of people in the world that feel that way. I almost didn't write the book because I was afraid. I never want to appear to be self-congratulatory. So I don't. I think the book will change my life in as much as I hope that we continue to open Ben's Friends chapters. That's the goal of the book. I don't know that I'm going to have a show on CNN, but who knows?
But that text that you got early in the morning is proof that it was. I mean, you know what Red Skelton used to say: "If I made one person laugh, then I've done my job." Well, if you stopped one person from going down the road to ruin, then the book has already done its job.
That's right. If there is one person that gets help from this, and I truly believe that, and it's then it was worth all of it.
Do you think that when people have an addiction to alcohol, that addiction causes mental health issues, or do you think a person has a mental health issue before they get addicted to alcohol?
So that's a great question, and that's one that will probably be debated in the mental health circles until the end of time. I say all the time, I'm glad I was a garden variety drunk, meaning that like once I addressed my alcohol issue, I've been a fairly well-adjusted member of society. There are people that struggle with bipolar disorder. There are people that struggle with other mental health disorders. But one thing we know is that you've got to get the bottle gone before you can address any of the other things. And, so my mental health disorder is addiction, right? I mean, I have an addictive personality. It's genetically in my family, which is another huge factor. Genetics play a huge role in it. But I think that alcohol can both be the problem, but it can also mask other problems. I'm always amazed in early sobriety. I mean, people they've been prescribed. I'm on 6 different antidepressants, mood stabilizers, and once they get sober for a period of time, they're able to live a life without medication at all. That's not the case 100% of the time, but it is the case the majority of the time.
How do you get the family of the person who is addicted to not go through their own denial stage and to try to get that person help?
Family dynamic is a big one, and I get a lot of emails from, my brother is an alcoholic. I get a lot of emails from the sisters, the parents. I just got an email from a mom. Son is an Iraqi war vet, PTSD. He's bad on heroin. Denial is a tough thing because there's a lot of shame around addiction, right? And one of the things that I heard early that I thought was really powerful, we're not bad people trying to get good. We're sick people trying to get well. And I think that when you can really hone in on the fact that this is a disease, I was born with it. The trauma of my father dying at 10 years old was probably the match to the gasoline. But I was always going to end up addicted to alcohol and drugs. It's a matter of when. I think the families have to come to terms with this isn't a failure on parenting. It's not a statement of moral compass. It's a disease like cancer. And the really maddening thing about addiction, I say this all the time, it's the disease that tells you don't have a disease. And what I mean by that is cancer patients aren't walking around saying, I don't have cancer. But there are alcoholics walking around saying, I'm fine. I mean, 20% of Americans are addicted to alcohol. So it's not a small issue.
Now, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm just making an observation here. It seems like the thing that was your biggest Superman is the fact that the restaurant business accepted you. You didn't feel alienated. You didn't feel left out. And I guess we could just boil that down to the word love. And your book is brilliant. It's a brilliant title, Say Grace. I love the title. And maybe we can talk more about the title. But I just think knowing your background, knowing how you were, I guess, feeling like an outsider or even rejected, and then suddenly you find this business that doesn't do that to you, that was the antidote for what might have been maybe the underlying reason for the alcoholism.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, there's a big debate about, of course, does the restaurant business make you an alcoholic, right? And you get that a lot. And I say this all the time. I was already well into my addiction before I found the restaurant business. Did the restaurant business, was it a playground for my bad behavior? Absolutely. Does it continue to be? Yes. But that's why I think I'm so grateful. I don't think Ben's Friends is growing like it is 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I don't even think that the interest to publish this book was around 5 years ago. I think we're finally at this moment where we're going. And I think, let's be honest, the opioid crisis, I mean, people are dying at a much younger age. When I was drinking and doing drugs, that was not really around. But I think it's kind of been this confluence of events that people, as an industry, we're finally going like, listen, we take care of guests every single night. We have to figure out how to take care of ourselves. So I would never say that the restaurant business made me an alcoholic. I reject that. Is it a playground for that kind of behavior? It is. Are we, as an industry, starting to clean ourselves up? We are. And my goal, listen, as you can tell, the restaurant business has given me everything that I have in my life, everything. And so my endeavor is to make it a better industry than I found it when I came in it.
We hear that cities and states are trying to pass laws that the bartender needs to be a watcher person and count the drinks of people that are drinking. Is that a good idea, or should each establishment have a policy like that, or just not have one at all?
Well, we have those policies. The challenge, and listen, there are, it's against the law in many of the states that we serve alcohol in to serve people that are intoxicated. The challenge, I think the unfair burden can become, I've never met you before, and you walk into my bar or restaurant. I'm serving you, and there are people that it's like, wow, it's obvious that they're intoxicated. But that's a real fine line when you've never met someone before, knowing, have they had enough? Have they had too much? Certainly, my company, we have a very strict policy. We don't serve people that are intoxicated. We don't allow employees to drink on the job. The time-honored shift drink and all of the sort of let's sit down to work after and have a beer. We've gotten rid of that. So I do think we as an industry have a real responsibility to really engage in responsible drinking. Again, not anti-alcohol. The good news is, as Americans, we're drinking less alcohol than ever before, so that's a good thing. I think it is the restaurant owner's responsibility and the staff to educate the staff. It's just, there's a little bit of a fine line when it's 8:30 on a Saturday night and you've got 30 people at your bar waiting for a drink, trying to determine, who's sober and who's not.
Really?
But that is our responsibility for sure.
The book again is called Say Grace: How the Restaurant Business Saved My Life. It's written by our guest Steve Palmer. It's currently #1 on Amazon in a category that I don't remember. But I wanted to read one of the reviews. First of all, you have 5-star reviews across the board. Everybody who has reviewed it so far has given it 5 stars. One of them I wanted to read. This is from somebody named Ali, A-L-I-E. And this is what Ali wrote. I purchased this book in the morning and finished it before the night was over. I have no words that express how I feel after reading these incredibly vulnerable stories of a successful man living his truth. It is a must-read for anyone of any background, but those especially who work or have worked in the food and beverage industry. So the one thing I would add to it is, I'm just going to say this off the top of my head, that this took some courage on your part. I can understand why you were reluctant to actually release your stories.
Yeah, I mean, there are chapters in the book where I was abducted and tortured in a mental health facility in the early 80s, talking about homelessness. And I mean, I revisited the darkest parts of my life, and a lot of people have asked me, was it cathartic? Was it? And the answer was no. It was dark, and it was not. It was a painful process to write. And by no means am I trying to emote sympathy, but it was. I mean, I wrote about the absolute darkest parts of my life, and I wrote about them as honestly and as factually as I could. It was a painful process. I'm not going to tell you that I felt some big wave of relief or some joy afterwards. It was a very painful process.
I was a fan of Anthony Bourdain because he was always honest. That's what I liked about him. He's just an honest guy.
That's right.
That's who you are. And as a radio host, I always wanted Anthony Bourdain to be a guest. And then when we learned that he had died, we were very disappointed for more than one way. So, Steve, if you had published this book and if he had read it, maybe he would have gotten something out of it too. I don't know.
I don't know. He was loved by a lot of my friends. He was friends with guys that I really respect, and I'm told, I certainly don't know, that he struggled with depression as well. So my heart goes out for his family, and he made an indelible impression on our industry, and I hope that his family knows, what his unfortunate suicide has brought about. I'm absolutely convinced it's why Ben's friends went from 1 or 2 groups to 11, 12, 13, 14.
Probably, yeah.
I think chefs around the country started taking notice.
Steve, thank you so much for being on the air with us. The book is on Amazon. Do you have a website you want to recommend?
No, Amazon's great. You can look on bensfriendshope.com for the book, as well as information about our nonprofit and about the cities we're growing to. And thanks so much for having me. And listen, thank you for your interest in this topic.
Thank you, Steve. I love this interview. We'll be right back.
News. I'm Chris Foster. Rules will be established today for tomorrow's debate and vote on President Trump's impeachment in the House, then a trial in the Senate next month. The top Senate Republican, Mitch McConnell.
It appears that the most rushed, least thorough, and most unfair impeachment inquiry